Hello everyone, I have finished this sketchbook and it is time to start a new one. So as you can see, this sketchbook is very well loved, very well used from all the scratches and dents on it. But I'm going to be starting this one today in the video, which is the exact same kind of sketchbook, but it's the pastel violet cover. So this is the Royal Talons Art Creation sketchbook, and it's in the 13 by 21 centimeter size, which is roughly A5 for them. This is something like the 11th or 12th or 13th, somewhere around there, art creation sketchbook I've used at this point. I don't number my sketchbooks, but I do date them. This is the creator of the sticker you're seeing on there, Sushi Art Studio. Love their stickers. 100% recommend. They're amazing stickers. I've used them on so many of my sketchbooks at this point. But I've been hoarding this really large sticker for years, and it was time. It was time to finally use this sticker, and I feel like it fits really nicely with the pastel violet cover. So yay, I finally get to use this. I love collecting stickers to use for my sketchbooks, and I tend to only put one on the cover. But you're seeing me going into my small sticker collection here because when it comes to paper stickers, so stickers that don't have like a vinyl coating on them, I like to use the paper ones inside my sketchbook, typically on the first spread when you open the sketchbook, because I like to set up a North Star page is what I call this. I'm probably going to do a full video on the North Star page. I'm not going to cover it in depth today, but it's basically the place that I just refer back to remember my guiding thoughts of the moment. So it's where I might put things that I'm currently studying, areas that I'm wanting to focus on in my practice, what projects I might have going, and maybe like a list of the artists I'm enjoying at the moment, the subjects I'm enjoying at the moment. It's just a place for me to refer back to remind myself of the direction that I'm heading in. That's why I've called it the North Star page. It's just a cliche meaning. Let's get into the actual drawing part of this. So as you can see, I'm starting to lay down some very, very light structure lines. For this first page, I'm only using ballpoint pen. I'm using a Bic 4-in-1, and I'm primarily using the black ink, but I do reach for the red just for some details towards the end. And I am drawing on the first spread of the sketchbook, which is something that I go back and forth between when it comes to certain kinds of sketchbooks. And this is just purely a preference thing. I don't particularly like the first spread in sketchbooks where the paper is glued together differently than the rest of the sketchbook. It just really annoys me when I'm drawing. And it's usually the left-hand page that is the most annoying in that experience for me. So if I do choose to draw on this spread, I usually only draw on the right-hand page, which is what I'm doing in this. But there are oftentimes sketchbooks where I just don't want to deal with the first spread because of that weird thing, and I start on the following page, the following spread, and then go on from there. And then I just end up using the skipped spread for things like swatching or starting up my ballpoint pen and things like that as I'm using the sketchbook. But in this case, I went with how I was feeling at the time. I felt like drawing in this first spread, so I did. I generally go for how I am feeling at the time when it comes to deciding things like where I want to start, what tool I want to use, what subject I want to do, and what balance of comfort and challenge I want to have. And for this, I wanted to have an element of comfort. And for the comfort, I knew that I wanted to do a subject that I really love doing. And in this case, it was characters and specifically elves. And then I wanted to have some element of challenge in there. So there were two things I was kind of thinking about when it came to the challenge. One was that I wanted to deal with a hand pose that I'm not too used to. So In this case, I am drawing from reference, and I'll speak about that in a moment. But I wanted to do a hand pose that I'm not used to, and then I wanted to use a medium that I can't erase. So in this case, I'm using ballpoint pen. It's the classic medium that I use when I sketch and I don't want to deal with erasing. And why I pick it is dependent on the situation. In this particular situation, it's because I didn't want to deal with first page perfectionism. If I'm ever worried about making a page perfect or whatever, then I reach for my non-erasable tools, so inks and things, so that I do end up making mistakes and they are permanent. And that has been the way for me to overcome making the mistake. Making the mistakes is by making the mistakes and realizing that they actually help me improve and they help me draw. Because if I just sit there not drawing because I don't want to make a mistake, then I don't draw. But I want to draw and I want to improve. So I need to get out of my own way and draw. That's kind of how I have come to dealing with things like perfectionism over the years. Of course, there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes. Behind that, it is just a simplification of it, but I digress. I'm using a ballpoint pen in this case because it's a nice middle ground. I can still start with light lines and build up, so there isn't an element of just putting down straight black ink. I can build up slowly. You know how ballpoint pens work at this point. I've spoken about them a ton of times if you've seen many of my other sketching videos. But they're becoming really common again now, or ballpoint pens. I've noticed a lot of people are sketching with them, and I feel like that's really fun because a lot of people are sharing things about them, and yeah, I have noticed more and more people drawing with ballpoint pens now. And in all sorts of different ways as well. Some people even like color with them, almost like color pencil. They'll do shading and everything with them. I do a little bit of shading on my drawings, but for the most part, I leave them monochrome when I shade them, or I use two colors like I'm using for this one. And I'll have like a line art color and then like a shading color or something like that. Like when I drew Vessel from Sleep Token, I used black and red, obviously, though that would have to change now because the colors have changed. But yes, I'm very excited for the album coming out soon. Very excited. But anyway, I typically don't use them like I would use color pencils, so it's been really interesting to see all the different artists using them that way. I don't know if it's necessarily the way I would use them, because I don't feel like that is how I want to use them, if that makes sense. I feel like it's a really helpful thing to recognize when you enjoy what another person is doing, while at the same time recognizing that that is not what you do and what you enjoy to do. So I feel like that is the situation for me when it comes to seeing other people do ballpoint pen in different ways. I can learn a few things from them, but just because I really love how someone else is doing them doesn't mean that I need to draw that way or anything like that. It is a fine balance I've found over the years of learning from artists and remembering who you are and what you actually enjoy doing. It's very easy to fall into the trap of finding an artist, loving what they do, and then trying to be like them, and then a year later, after you've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours trying to learn what they do, realizing that you don't enjoy actually doing that thing and it is completely different to your natural style and you don't actually want to do it yourself, and then you find another artist that you really like and you end up wanting to do what they're doing, but they're using color pencils and you don't own any color pencils, so you might go out and buy 70 color pencils and then you realize you hate color pencils, and then yeah, it's a classic beginner trap, because at the same time it is fun exploring mediums, and at the same time it is useful to learn from other artists, and at the same time there are artists to learn from that are linked to the stuff you want to do and enjoy doing. Where am I going with this? I feel like I'm going on another ramble, but um, it is a subject that I'm passionate about because it's something that I've been through when I was very first learning, and I think it's something that a lot of artists go through is trying to figure out what artists to learn from and why, versus learning that, yes, this is just something I really like looking at and I'm very impressed by, or it looks really beautiful or whatever, but it isn't something I actually want to do or would enjoy doing. Yeah. We spent 3 minutes getting to a small point, which is classic for me at this point. But yeah. I mentioned reference earlier, so let's talk about that a little bit, shall we? I am using a reference pack by Howard Lyon. It is the Aspen Witch reference pack. I have been loving sketching with this. I picked it up around Halloween time last year on sale. I first came across his reference packs a few years back, and it was the bear packs, I think they're called. So it's a man in armor, and one of the packs, it has him in like woodland in a forest, and then the other one is in studio. And I picked up those as a bundle years ago, and I occasionally go back and check to see what is going on in his reference store every so often. I don't pick up reference too much anymore because I feel like I have a really nice library already to pull from. But there might be like the odd occasion in a year where I end up adding one more to my collection. So this was one of the ones I added last year, and like I mentioned, have been really enjoying it. His reference packs have like a very different vibe to the other big reference pack names out there, like Graphit Studio, for example. And it's sometimes nice to just have something different in your library, to have a little bit of diversity going on in terms of what the models look like, but also what they're wearing, what the themes are, and the lighting situation, and all of those kinds of things. So sometimes it's nice to just have different pools to pull from than just necessarily all from one place. I had a few different images up from that pack to pull from for this. And I mainly wanted to focus on the hand pose on one of them. So I did change a few things here and there. Obviously the most obvious change is the fact that I gave her elf ears, but I did change a few things here and there with the sketch that I ended up doing, but I wanted the hand pose to actually be a study from reference. So that was where I spent the most attention when it came to trying to learn from the reference. And it was also where I came across the most challenge. I did want to challenge myself, and I definitely did with this. And the main thing that I struggled with on the first pass was simplifying the fingers. When it comes to art, a big part of it is simplification, and then also grouping. So things like grouping of value, grouping of shapes, and things like that, and also simplification. So I didn't like how I dealt with the fingers on the first pass. I got too lost in the details, and I ended up making them too separate, I feel, and then I ended up redoing the hand because I doubled down trying to fix it, but I was essentially trying to polish a mistake at this point. So I ended up redoing the hand. And when I redid the hand, I focused more on trying to simplify and group. I really like how I ended up portraying the fingers in the second version. But when I was focusing on all of that in the second version, I ended up losing the proportions. So I prefer the proportions on the first hand, but I prefer the fingers on the second hand. And this, for me, is a way for me to learn what I want to study next. And this has been coming up in a few sketch pages and also a few videos within the last few months. Hands are an area that I have been studying quite heavily because they've been coming up quite heavily in my sketching sessions and then also in my illustrations and things recently. And I use my sketching time, my illustrations, my projects to determine what I need to study. I study from a mixture of what I'm currently struggling with, and then I also study the areas, subjects, and fundamentals that are most relevant to what I want to do and what I do. And that's how I determine my self studying, what courses I'm taking, and everything like that. So in this case, this has helped me realize that I want to spend some time on simplification. So I think it was a few videos back now. I know it was earlier in the year. I had a hand where I realized that I wanted to study the stylization of the fingers and then also the positioning of them. So I went off and did some of that. And then now I'm realizing that I want to focus on the simplification and grouping of fingers. So learning new things each time, and it's helping me inform my studying sessions. And proportion, of course, is another one that has come up because that's what I struggled with the second pass. So I am going to focus on those in my studying sessions next. I do feel a hand sketching video coming on. I'm also tempted to do a head sketching video soon as well. I know that there have been some requests for the head and portrait sketching before, not so much for hands, but I do feel hands coming on, and I'm sure people will be interested in watching that anyway. And as we're wrapping up here, and I'm doing a nice little just background element, thank you so much for watching and for listening. I really appreciate all of you and your comments. Let me know what you have been up to in your art practice lately and your sketchbook practice as well if you love sketchbooks like I do. And I will see you next time. Bye!